I rode with him every Tuesday and Thursday for 6 weeks before he ever looked at my face. Not really looked. He looked at the mirror when he wanted to check traffic behind us, and sometimes his eyes crossed mine in the glass. But that isn't the same as seeing a person. I was 71 years old, driving a gray Buick that belonged to my nephew's car service, and Marcus Vale never once asked me my name. He didn't need to. To him, I was a function, a pair of hands on a wheel, a body that got him from his condo on the east side to his office downtown, and later, some mornings, to a smaller building near the courthouse where he met with men in cheaper suits than his. I was the guy in the cap. That's what he called me once, on the phone, to somebody I never met. The guy in the cap can wait 5 more minutes. The guy in the cap was also the father of the woman he was going to marry in 19 days. He didn't know that. I want to say that again. Slower. Because it's the whole hinge the rest of this turns on. My daughter's fiancé rode in the back seat of my car for 6 weeks, twice a week, and never once understood that the 71-year-old driver up front was the man whose blessing he'd asked for at Thanksgiving, over a dinner he'd shown up 40 minutes late to. My name is Walter Combs. I drove city buses in Denver for 34 years before my knees gave out on the job and gave me a pension instead. My wife, Adele, passed 6 years ago from a stroke that took her in 11 minutes flat, faster than I could get from the garage to the hospital. After that, I didn't know what to do with my hands, so when my nephew Terrence, who runs a small livery service out of a garage on Colfax, asked if I wanted to pick up a few shifts driving executives around, I said yes before he finished the sentence. I never expected one of those executives to be Marcus. My daughter Renee is 36. She runs a nonprofit that places foster kids with trained mentors, work she built from nothing after her own mother died, work I am prouder of than almost anything else on this earth. She met Marcus at a fundraising gala 14 months ago. He does something with logistics and warehousing, moving freight contracts around the way some men move chess pieces, and he was smooth in the specific way that made me nervous from the first phone call, though I didn't say so. Fathers who say so too early get written out of the story. I'd learned that from watching other men do it badly. Terrence called me on a Sunday night, in September. His regular driver for the Vale account had torn his Achilles playing rec league basketball, and he needed someone reliable for 6 weeks while the account got reassigned, or the driver healed, whichever came first. Vale Logistics, he said. Marcus Vale. I told him I'd take it before I put together that it was the same Marcus. I almost called it off. I sat in my kitchen with the phone in my hand for 11 minutes. Adele's kitchen, still full of her yellow curtains I never got around to replacing, and I thought about telling Terrence to find somebody else. Then I thought about Renee's face at Thanksgiving, lit up in a way I hadn't seen since before her mother died, and I thought, maybe this is a chance to know him the way he actually is, not the way he performs for me across a dinner table. I did not think, sitting there in that kitchen, that I would learn what I learned. The cap was Adele's idea, in a way. She used to say a uniform makes you invisible, and she meant it as a kindness, back when she was a hospice nurse and needed people to stop treating her like company in their worst hour. I wore a gray driver's cap, a windbreaker with Terrence's company logo, reading glasses I didn't strictly need, but that changed my face just enough, and I let my beard grow out white and full after Adele died and never trimmed it back. The man in my rearview mirror those 6 weeks looked like nobody's father. He looked like the help. Marcus talked on the phone constantly, not occasionally constantly, the way some men fill silence, because silence asks something of them they aren't prepared to give. He talked to colleagues, to men named Priya and Dax, and someone he called the numbers guy. And twice a week, always on Thursday mornings around 8, he talked to a man named Colton Reyes, who I came to understand was his lawyer, though not the kind of lawyer who handles closings and wills, the kind who handles structures. That was Marcus's word. Structures. For the first 4 weeks it was nothing but the ordinary ugliness of a man who thinks nobody worth considering can hear him. He mocked a colleague's stutter to a client. He told a woman named Priya, flatly, over speaker, that if she cried in one more meeting he'd have HR reassign her off the account. And I watched his face in the mirror while he said it, and there was nothing there. No heat, no cruelty even, just a man doing paperwork with his mouth. He rehearsed, out loud, an apology to Renee for missing her nonprofit's benefit dinner, an apology that included fake weather trouble and a fake dead phone battery 3 days before the dinner had even happened. He was drafting the lie in advance, practicing it like a man practices a golf swing. None of that prepared me for the 5th week. It was a Thursday, raining the way it rains in Denver in early October, sideways and mean, and Marcus got in the back seat already on the phone with Colton. He didn't say good morning. He never said good morning. He said, "Tell me the amendment's ready." And Colton's voice came through the speaker, tinny and satisfied, and said, "Ready and buried. It's page 14 of the operating agreement. Inside the buyout provision. Renee signs the standard paperwork. She's not going to unwind 14 pages of an LLC restructuring on her wedding week." I kept my eyes on the road. 34 years of driving a city bus teaches you a particular kind of stillness. You learn to keep the wheel steady while a fight breaks out 4 rows back, while a man threatens another man with a bottle, while a woman goes into labor 2 stops from the hospital. Stillness isn't calm. Stillness is what you do while you decide what calm would even look like. Once the marriage clears, Marcus said, Halcyon Youth Partners folds into Vail Logistics as a subsidiary. I become co-signatory on every grant account and every donor-restricted fund the second the paperwork's final. Renee keeps her title. Doesn't matter. Signatory authority is what matters. My daughter's nonprofit, Halcyon, the name on the letterhead of the organization she had built out of grief and stubbornness, that placed 41 kids with mentors last year alone, that she ran on a shoestring and her own unpaid overtime. Marcus was describing it the way another man might describe a warehouse he intended to gut for parts. "And the old man?" Colton asked. I want you to understand that I did not react. My hands did not move on the wheel. My foot did not lift off the gas. I have thought about that moment more times than I can count since. The specific discipline it took to keep driving while a stranger discussed my elimination from my own daughter's life in the past tense, like a fact already settled. "Walter," Marcus said, and hearing my own name in his mouth for the first time, spoken with that particular flatness, was worse than anything he could have called me instead. Renee mentioned he's been having memory lapses, repeating himself, forgetting names at the benefit dinner. That was a lie built entirely from nothing. I have never once repeated a story to Renee without her rolling her eyes at me for repeating it, the way daughters do. But I have never forgotten a name in my life, and Marcus knew it, because he was building a case, not describing a man. There's a guardianship pathway, if it comes to that. Halcyon's bylaws require board approval for major partnerships, and Walter's been sitting on that board as a courtesy seat since Adele died. If he's incapacitated, or found to be, the seat opens up. We move fast, before the kid tries to hire outside counsel to slow us down. The kid was Renee, 36 years old, running an organization with a $5 million operating budget, and Marcus called her the kid, the same practiced flatness in his voice he used for everyone he considered smaller than himself. A waiter was a hand carrying a tray. A driver was a windbreaker and a cap. And apparently a fiancé, once the ring was on, became an asset with signatory authority attached. "You have 90 days?" Colton said. "Before the donor reporting deadline flags any restructuring. Clean window. Plenty of time," Marcus said, and I heard him lean back against the leather seat, satisfied, the way a man sounds when he believes the hardest part is already finished. She loves the idea of partnership. I just have to make sure she never reads past the signature page. We stopped at a red light outside St. Aloysius, the church where Renee and Marcus were supposed to be married in 19 days. The church where Adele and I had been married 41 years before her. Marcus glanced up, saw it through the rain-streaked window, and made a small sound in his throat that might have been satisfaction. Then he leaned forward and tapped the back of my seat. 2 knuckles. The way you'd knock on a door you didn't expect anyone to answer. "Can you swing by the Larkspur building instead of the office? I've got a 9:15. "Yes, sir," I said. My voice came out level. 34 years of driving buses through Denver winters, through fights and floods, and a man once holding a knife to another passenger's throat 2 feet behind my head. That voice had been trained by worse than this. Level didn't mean I wasn't shaking somewhere underneath it. Level meant I hadn't decided yet what to do with the shaking. I dropped him at Larkspur. He got out without an umbrella, jogged through the rain toward the glass doors, and never looked back at the car. Never looked back at me. I sat there at the curb for almost 2 full minutes after he disappeared inside, both hands still on the wheel, before I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding since St. Aloysius. My first instinct was to call Renee right there from the curb. My second instinct, worse, was to drive to Larkspur's parking garage, wait for Marcus to come back out, and say things to him I would not be able to take back. I did neither. 34 years of transit work teaches you that the worst decisions get made in the first 5 minutes after something breaks. You wait. You get the facts arranged so they can't be waved away as an old man's confusion, because that was exactly the trap already being built for me if I came at Renee with nothing but my word against her fiancés. I would only be proving the story Marcus had already started writing. The paranoid old man. The father, who can't let go. So instead I did something I hadn't done since Adele's illness, when I kept a small notebook of every doctor's word so I could ask better questions the next visit. I pulled into a gas station 2 blocks from Larkspur, took out the notepad I keep in my jacket for grocery lists, and wrote down everything I could remember, word for word, while it was still burning in my ears. The amendment, page 14, signatory authority, 90 days, guardianship pathway, courtesy seat. I wrote until my hand cramped. Then I called the one person who had known Adele's mind almost as well as I had, back when we set up Halcyon's original bylaws together at our kitchen table. Not a lawyer, not yet an old friend named Dorothy Nkemderim, who had been Adele's closest friend since nursing school, and who now sat, like I did, on Halcyon's small volunteer board. "Dorothy," I said, when she picked up, "I need you to tell me something, and I need you to tell me straight. Can somebody force a board member off with a guardianship claim, if there's no actual finding? Just an allegation?" She was quiet a moment. Then, "Who's trying?" I looked through the rain at the Larkspur building, at the floor where I guessed Marcus's 9:15 was happening right now, some other unsuspecting person on the other end of his flat, patient voice. "The man my daughter's about to marry," I said. Dorothy didn't ask more questions over the phone. She never did one of the things Adele loved about her, and one of the things I'd come to rely on these past 6 years. She told me to get her everything I had, in writing, and to say nothing to Renee yet. Not because Renee didn't deserve the truth, but because the truth needed to arrive wearing evidence, not just an old man's grief and suspicion. For the next 11 days, I kept driving. That was the hardest part, not the confrontation, which hadn't come yet, but the ordinary, grinding discipline of picking Marcus up every Tuesday and Thursday, opening the door for him, saying, "Where to, sir?" and listening. I learned things a person shouldn't have to learn about the man his daughter loves. I learned that Colton had already drafted the guardianship filing, dated and ready, needing only a triggering incident to file a fall, a forgotten appointment, anything that could be spun into cognitive concern. I learned Marcus had quietly moved 40% of his own liquid assets into a trust structure, Colton called insulated, so that if the marriage ever fell apart, none of it would be considered marital property, while Halcyon's donor funds the money meant for foster kids, for mentors, for kids like the ones Renee herself had once been sat exposed and unprotected, exactly the way he needed them to. And I learned, on the second to last Thursday, the detail that finally broke something loose in my chest and turned quiet grief into cold, exact resolve. "What if Walter doesn't cooperate?" Colton asked. "What if he sees something, says something to her early?" Marcus laughed. Actually laughed, a short, easy sound, like he was being asked what happens if it rains on a day he's already planned around rain. "He won't," Marcus said. "Renee already believes her father's protective to the point of controlling. I've spent a year making sure of that. Every time he asks a question about the wedding budget or the venue contract, I make sure she hears it as him trying to run her life again. If he comes to her with an accusation and no proof, I don't even have to defend myself. She'll defend me. That's the whole design." I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles went the color of bone. He hadn't just been planning to take the nonprofit and push me out. He had spent a year, quietly, turning my own daughter's love for me into a weapon he could aim back at me the moment I tried to warn her. Every offhand comment I'd made about the venue's cancellation policy, every question about whether Halcyon's insurance covered the reception he had been collecting those, reshaping them in Renee's mind into evidence of a controlling father, so that the day I finally spoke the truth out loud, she would already be primed to hear it as exactly what he needed her to hear. An old man who couldn't let his daughter go. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at Adele's kitchen table with the notebook open in front of me, and I thought about what she would have told me to do, and I knew, the way you know your own hands, that she would have told me the same thing Dorothy had. Don't hand him the story he's already written. Build a different one, out of facts he can't spin, and let Renee walk into it herself. Dorothy and I met with a real attorney 9 days before the wedding, not Marcus's kind of lawyer, but a careful, unhurried woman named Priscilla Odom who specialized in nonprofit governance and who read through Halcyon's bylaws twice before she said a single word about what we should do. She confirmed what Dorothy had suspected. The operating agreement amendment Marcus and Colton had drafted was legally aggressive but not, on its own, illegal, deceptive, predatory, morally rotten, but not yet a crime, unless it could be shown Marcus had misrepresented material terms to Renee directly, in writing, to get her signature, which meant the whole plan hinged on one thing. Renee had to actually see, in his own words, what he intended to do, before her signature made any of it real. I had 11 days of notes. I had dates, times, exact phrases. What I did not have was a way to show Renee any of it that wouldn't sound, at first, exactly like what Marcus had already trained her to expect from me. So I asked Terrence for one more favor. He kept, as all his cars did, a small dashboard notice near the rear door required by his insurance, the kind nobody reads, informing passengers that for driver and passenger safety, audio may be recorded during the ride. Marcus had ridden past that notice 20-some mornings and never once glanced down at it, the same way he'd never once glanced at my face. I had never turned the recorder on before that final week. Adele raised me better than to go digging for what wasn't offered freely, but a warning posted plainly, unread by a man too important to read it, is a different thing than a trap. Terrence confirmed the recordings were legal under Colorado's one-party consent law, since I was a party to every conversation that happened in that car. On the last Thursday, 6 days before the wedding, I let it run. Marcus gave Colton the final version of the plan that morning, laid out clean and complete, in his own voice, with dates and dollar amounts, and my name spoken like an obstacle, already cleared. It was the ugliest 22 minutes of my life to sit through, and it was also, finally, the proof. I did not confront him in the car. I had promised myself that much not because I didn't want to, God knows I wanted to, but because the moment I opened my mouth and let him see my face clearly for the first time, I would lose the only advantage I had left, which was that he still didn't know who I was. I dropped him at his office. He got out, didn't say thank you, never did, and I drove 3 blocks before I had to pull over and sit with both hands over my face for a long time. Then I drove to Renee's apartment. She opened the door already smiling, mid-sentence about seating charts, and the smile slid sideways when she saw my face. "Dad? What's wrong?" I didn't sit down. I told her I needed her to listen to something before she said a word, and I needed her to trust, just for the length of one recording, that I wasn't the man Marcus had spent a year convincing her I was. She went pale around the eyes, but she nodded, and I played it. All 22 minutes, standing in her kitchen, her wedding dress hanging in its garment bag from the closet door behind her, visible the entire time. His voice filled the room, describing her nonprofit as an asset and her father as an obstacle, already handled. I watched her face do something I will never be able to fully describe. It wasn't just shock. It was the specific, terrible work of a person rebuilding, in real time, everything they thought they understood about the last 14 months of their life. He said I'd defend him, she whispered when the recording ended. He said that, out loud. Yes, and I would have. If you'd come to me with nothing but this, she gestured at me, at my whole self, standing there in my old gray cap I hadn't even thought to take off, I would have believed him over you. Wouldn't I? I didn't answer that, because it was true, and because there was nothing kind to say about it. She didn't scream. She didn't throw anything, though I would not have blamed her. She sat down very slowly at her kitchen table, the same kind of slow, careful sitting I recognized from the week Adele died, grief moving through a body one joint at a time, and she said, "I need you to tell me everything, from the beginning. Don't leave anything out to protect me." So I did. Marcus called her 4 times that evening. She let it ring. On the 5th call she answered, put him on speaker without telling him, and asked him one question, flat and even, a tone I recognized because it was Adele's tone, the one she used on hospital administrators who tried to move too fast. "What happens to Halcyon's donor funds after we're married?" There was a pause on his end just long enough to tell me he understood exactly what was happening. "Where's this coming from?" he said. Careful now, the flatness gone, something sharper underneath it. "Answer the question, Marcus." He tried the story anyway. I'll give him that much credit, he was good. Even cornered, even knowing something had shifted. He talked about partnership, about protecting the mission long term, about wanting to formalize what they'd already discussed. Renee let him talk for almost 2 full minutes before she said, very quietly, I have a recording of you telling Colton, I'll never read past the signature page. The silence on the other end of that call lasted so long I thought the connection had dropped. You need to understand something, he finally said, and his voice had changed entirely, gone cold and careful in a way that told me, more than anything else, exactly what kind of man he really was underneath 14 months of charm. If you cancel this wedding based on your father's paranoid recording of a private business call, I will make sure every donor Halcyon has ever worked with hears that its founder is being controlled by an elderly man with documented memory issues. I have 3 emails already drafted. There it was. The trap sprung open, exactly as he'd described it to Colton. Except this time Renee was standing on the other side of it with her eyes open. There are no documented memory issues, she said. There's a man who ran city buses for 34 years without a single accident. And there's you, on tape, planning to fabricate some. Her voice did not shake. I want that written down clearly, because in every version of this story that matters, it is Renee's steadiness in that kitchen that ends it, not mine. The wedding's off, Marcus. I'll have my attorney send notice tomorrow. And if one email about my father goes out, we'll have that recording transcribed and filed with it. He tried 3 more times to call that night. She let all 3 ring out, and then she blocked the number, sitting at her kitchen table, with her wedding dress still hanging behind her, and I sat across from her until almost 2 in the morning while she cried and got angry and cried again. The whole exhausting, necessary cycle of a person grieving a future that had never actually existed the way she'd believed it did. I wish I could tell you it ended clean and fast after that. It didn't. Marcus, through Colton, sent a letter 3 days later threatening a defamation claim over the recording, which Priscilla answered within 48 hours with a letter of her own, citing Colorado's one-party consent statute and a very specific reminder that discovery in any defamation suit would require Marcus and Colton to produce their own correspondence regarding Halcyon's restructuring. The threat evaporated within a week. He never filed. He also, we learned much later through a mutual contact at his own firm, quietly resigned from Vail Logistics 8 months on, after 2 other business relationships soured under circumstances nobody would describe to us in detail, and I have chosen, deliberately, not to go looking for more than that. Some stories aren't mine to keep following. Renee canceled the venue. She ate the deposit $11,000, money that stung to lose and that neither of us mentioned again after the first week, because some costs you pay simply to be finished paying them. She took a month away from Halcyon's day-to-day, the first real time off she'd given herself since her mother died, and spent part of it up at my place near Sable Lake, sleeping in the room that used to be hers as a girl, the 2 of us mostly quiet in the evenings, working through what trust was supposed to look like now, for both of us. Because I want to be honest about my own part in this, the part that isn't flattering. I had known, for almost 2 years, that Renee was working herself into the ground running Halcyon on faith and unpaid hours, refusing to bring on a second executive because she was afraid of losing control of something she'd built out of her own grief. I never told her clearly that I thought it was unsustainable because I was afraid of sounding exactly like the controlling father Marcus. Later convinced her I was, so I stayed quiet. And my silence left a gap in her judgment that a much worse man was able to walk straight through. I told her that, sitting on the porch at Sable Lake in October, the leaves already turning, and it was one of the harder things I've said out loud in 6 years. You should have told me, she said. I know, but you're not the one who tried to steal from me, she said, after a while, and I need to be able to hold both of those things without pretending they're the same size. We sat with that a long time. Halcyon is doing well now, nearly 2 years on. Renee finally hired that second executive, a woman named Priya, a different Priya, she likes to remind me, laughing, than the one Marcus used to threaten over speakerphone, and the 2 of them run the place with a kind of shared weight. I never saw Renee carry a loan before. The board tightened its bylaws around any future major partnerships, at Dorothy's insistence, requiring outside legal review before any signatory changes. A policy everyone now just calls the Walter Clause, which embarrasses me every time somebody says it out loud in a meeting, though I notice I never actually ask them to stop. I still drive for Terrence, 3 days a week now instead of 2. Not because I need the money, the pension covers what I need, but because I discovered something in those 6 weeks I never expected to discover at 71. That being the man nobody looks at twice is not the same as being a man nobody needs. I drive elderly folks to dialysis on Mondays. I drive a young mother named Selma and her twin boys to their pediatrician on Wednesdays, and she has started leaving a thermos of coffee in my cup holder before I even ask. I drive whoever Terrence sends my way, and I have started, slowly, letting people see my actual face, because I learned the hard way what it costs when a man decides you're not worth looking at. Renee comes up to Sable Lake most Sundays now. Last month she brought a folder with her, sat it on the porch table between us without a word, and inside was a formal amendment naming me an official advisor to Halcyon's board. Not a courtesy seat this time, an actual seat, with actual authority, the thing Marcus had once planned to strip from me by force. I told her she didn't have to do that. She said she knew. She did it anyway. I keep one photograph now on the refrigerator in Adele's kitchen, the yellow curtains still hanging behind it, that I never did get around to replacing and don't plan to anymore. It's from Halcyon's spring benefit, the one Marcus once faked a dead phone battery to avoid. Renee is in the center, laughing at something off camera, Priya beside her, Dorothy on the other side with her cane she still refuses to admit she needs. I'm at the edge of the frame in my good jacket, not my cap, not my windbreaker. Just a man at his daughter's event, visible, looked at, seen. Last Tuesday I picked up a new regular for Terrence, a retired mail carrier named Otis, who just moved into the building near the garage after a fall made the stairs at his old place too much. He got in the back seat, read the little notice by the door out of what I could tell was genuine habit, not suspicion, and asked, "You the owner of this outfit?" "No," I said, "just the driver." "That all you do?" I thought about that question longer than it probably deserved. Then I told him the truth that I was a driver, and a father, and a board advisor now besides, and a man who once sat perfectly still behind a wheel while somebody planned to erase him, and didn't let it happen. "That's a lot of jobs," Otis said. "Only one of them matters," I told him, and adjusted the mirror so I could see the road behind us clearly, the whole wide stretch of it, all the way back to where we'd started.